Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
Hey, I'm here.
Excellent. So today, everyone, to our viewers who are listening, we are going to be discussing the Afghan withdrawal. We are joined today by Wyatt Claypool. We're also joined by Pangier Resistance Fan. And we should also soon be joined by Tris Burns Lands in just a moment.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, today is August 31st. Today, ladies and gentlemen, is the day where the United States has officially ended the war in Afghanistan, or so it thinks.
We've ended our involvement, but the war is still going on.
Actually, I'm actually doing an introduction statement real quick.
Oh, sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, the United States has decided that after 20 years of war, it is going to leave Afghanistan and abandon the people of Afghanistan to the Taliban. This is, ladies and gentlemen, our Saigon. This is our generation's Saigon. Rather than stay the course and defend the people of Afghanistan and keep a status quo as fragile as it was, a status quo in which the people of Afghanistan had many freedoms that they had gained over the years, where women were going to university, going to school, elected to parliament, gaining an untold number of rights in a society that before had been very religiously conservative and restrictive for women. A nation that once were Christians, now, for once during the American intervention could worship freely, are now going to be forced underground and persecuted by Islamist terrorists who are now going to subject them to Sharia-like laws in which they will be treated as less than second-class citizens, in which you will be convert, pay a fee, or leave or die. We also are now abandoning Afghanistan to not only to the Taliban but to Al-Qaeda affiliates, who have now been shown to be returning to Afghanistan because it is now a safe haven for them. Ladies and gentlemen, the Biden administration and the Kamala Harris administration have decided that Afghans are expendable. They have decided that the Afghan people are expendable for a fake peace. Ladies and gentlemen, the nation that combated and defeated German and Austro-Hungarian and Turkish Ottoman imperialism in World War I, the nation that defeated Nazi Germany, neo-imperialist Japan, and Benito Mussolini in Italy, the nation that fought a 40-year soft Cold War against the USSR, which was equivalent to Nazi Germany in its evil and banality. The nation that stood against all these evils now has decided to sacrifice its history of standing up to evil and to cave in and to give up. To discuss these issues with me today are several neoconservatives or allies of the neoconservative cause, and I want to welcome them here today. So first we have Tristan, who is the founder and leader of the Irish Unionist Party, and we want to welcome him today. How are you doing, Tristan?
Just ask, is my mic all right for you?
I can hear you perfectly.
All right. Yeah, I'm doing all right. Thank you for letting me on today.
No problem. I also want to welcome today also Pangier fan, because who is a pro-interventionist blogger and advocate on Twitter. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Yeah, I am beyond disappointed with the Biden administration. I voted for Biden in 2020 in part because I thought he would be a breath of fresh air from the Trump administration's isolationist foreign policy. And that is not shaping out. It's not shaping out the way I wanted. And the debacle in Afghanistan is just inexcusable.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. And I also want to finally welcome to Wyatt Claypool. He is a senior correspondent for the National Telegraphic. How are you doing today, Wyatt?
Is that working now? Okay. For
Yes,
some reason,
I can hear you.
Okay, it kept muting me and unmuting me. Yeah. Like,
Sorry.
This is really disgusting. But to be fair, I didn't really expect anything differently from Biden. That's why I still liked Donald Trump going into the 2020 election, because I could at least see that Trump is the type of guy where if you actually try and mess with the United States, even though his foreign policy ideas aren't always good, if you do try to attack Americans, or if the Taliban is invading the rest of Afghanistan, he would actually push back, even if I thought he might have tried to pull out of Afghanistan, which is a little bit dubious because he had planned on doing it for his entire term and never really got around to it. He was at least the guy who respected American soldiers enough to retaliate quickly and aggressively if they were ever attacked or put in danger, and he would never have put them in this sort of danger for this like ridiculous extraction.
I completely agree with that. The idea that this has been a ridiculous extraction. So Tristan, and to my viewers now. So I'm now going to unmute you all, so that way you can all just speak and get your thoughts out. Tristan, let's start with you, since you only had a very small introduction. Give us your thoughts. What the heck is Biden and Harris thinking? I mean, do they not realize that caving in terrorism will only lead to more terrorism? I mean, you yourself know from the region that you're from, Ireland, caving to IRA terrorism only enables and emboldens more terrorism.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't particularly. I understood what Joe Biden is doing, which is selling out to the Taliban, mainly because from where he's standing, he has more to gain from a Taliban Afghanistan than a non-Taliban Afghanistan. It's not morally right. I understand why he done it, and it is completely wrong that he done it, and I don't think that anyone should be at all defending his actions, because he sees it as a way to have an unstable nation next to China and all that. It's a bit sad to see. Caving to terrorists never works. It only strengthens them, and I feel really bad for the people in Afghanistan at the moment.
I feel absolutely awful for them too. I mean, this is just a slap in the face to every Afghan who's ever worked with the United States, British, French, or NATO forces. It essentially has told them that we don't have your back. And, we're going to discuss this in a moment too, how Afghan interpreters who literally risk their lives, for American, British, and French and NATO forces have literally been abandoned to the Taliban. And now the Taliban are literally now, looking for them and hunting for them. Panjir fan, talk about this too. I mean, what does this tell our friends and our allies in Afghanistan that, well, now former allies, because we've essentially slapped them in the face and told them, you're on your own. I mean, what does this tell all the Afghans who have literally died in this conflict fighting for their country?
Well, I think I've often said, non-interventionism, it has an intrinsically racist backing. It basically says that we don't believe some people are worth fighting for. And not only that, I think that our abandonment of Afghanistan not only sends a message to Afghans that we don't care enough about them to continue fighting for their freedom, but other hostile nations will now smell blood in the water. Like, can Taiwan even trust us to come to their aid when China When China sees how we abandoned Afghanistan, I mean, China probably smells blood in the water now, and is probably going to be more aggressive towards Taiwan, towards Hong Kong, and because they know that we won't do anything about it. And so I think that this has ramifications that go far beyond Afghanistan.
Well, it just shows the broken foreign policy of Joe Biden in the sense that he's one of those people that worships diplomacy. He loves the fact that he loves talking to other countries. You know, I mean, it's sort of this weird worship of the fact that we are talking means that somehow we're doing something good. It's the same problem I have with Justin Trudeau in Canada, is that he thinks that regardless of the fact that China's literally like imprisoning Canadians for doing nothing, he thinks that as long as we're talking and we're like talking about the issues, we're getting somewhere. And Joe Biden thinks that people value that sort of model UN type of governance like he does. It's silly. You can't talk to terrorists like you talk to Denmark. You have to talk to terrorists like they're terrorists, which means shoot them and not talk. You know, I don't understand where you can sort of tell he's sort of he's in an echo chamber where no one in his administration will tell him he's wrong or point out where he's wrong, which is why he can get away with just saying everyone agrees with me, despite the fact that we've heard news reports of his generals and other foreign policy advisors openly telling him this is a ridiculous plan and it was going to get people killed.
Yeah, I have no idea why Biden is so dead set on claiming this as a success. Like, I thought he would at least change the parameters of the withdrawal after the massive humanitarian crisis began to unfold, but no, he doubled down, and that's what I find most unforgivable. I mean, people make mistakes, even on a big level like Joe Biden did, and that's forgivable. But doubling down on a mistake is not forgivable, and that's what I've seen Biden do when it comes to Afghanistan. He's doubling down on his mistakes.
You know, absolutely. It's not just him that Biden that's doubling down on his mistakes. It's actually a lot of his fans and supporters on Twitter and on the blog sphere who are making every excuse in the book to legitimize this absolutely debacle of a withdrawal and the consequences of it. And hopefully we'll get a chance to review some of those comments, because they're just absolutely god awful. But I like what you said, though, Panjshir fan, talking about blood in the water, because you're right. I mean, North Korea, which under the Trump administration, and I've got faults with Trump for the North Korean talks, but actually which stopped its nuclear uranium stuff, is now restarting that program. In this year, in July, and we'll show the article for that, it has been found that the North Koreans are restarting their program. And I'm going to show that article. I've got it somewhere here, I think. No, not that one. Oh, shoot. I had it. No, I had it here.
Just to jump in here for a second, just the thing that Quick Sticks Production said, the second comment, I would say that the whole argument that some people raise, I'm not sure if Quick is just saying this as like the justification that the Biden administration is using, that the majority of Americans want to get out of Afghanistan, is that the thing is, I don't think Americans even care enough about foreign policy for it to really be a big concern. There's this, I think it's almost a bias towards polling, that if you poll Americans or poll anyone on any issue and there's a majority on one side and not the other, that means it's somehow important to people. Where foreign policy has always been a very niche subject. Kyle Kulinski and those people are the sort of like standard bearers for the foreign policy isolationists, and they're not even really all that big. People don't really care about the issue, and everyone knows that the president is in charge of foreign policy at the end of the day, and whoever they vote for is who they vote for. And I think it's very telling that as soon as Biden started trying to pull out of Afghanistan, the polls immediately switched to why didn't we stay in Afghanistan? As people don't really know what they want in Afghanistan, and they don't really vote based on foreign policy, because if they knew what Joe Biden's foreign policy was, they probably wouldn't have gone for him. It's just that pulling out of Afghanistan sounds very nice and clean, but it's never actually that simple. And the way that people are pulled on the issues is just always overly simplistic and has a very sort of hippie-ish Vietnam sort of feel to it, in my mind.
Yeah, exactly. And sorry, guys, I did find that article, so I'm going to share it. So here, everyone, is a article right here. So from Business Insider. North Korea seems to be ramping up its nuclear arsenal by restarting its reactor that's been inactive for years. So this is the article. This arsenal. This is the facility right here. Here's pictures of the area. Okay. This facility had been inactive since 2018. Okay. During this time, that was when the Trump administration was in charge. And granted, I've got a lot of faults for them for even talking with the North Koreans, but since 2018, that facility was shut down. But guess what happened now? So earlier this month, Kim Ho-jong, the sister of the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, threatened to strengthen the military in response to joint military exercises by North and South Korea. But we all know, though, that that's just an excuse for saying that we don't think that the Biden administration is going to stand up to us, so we're going to do what we want. Because guess what happened? The Journal reported that the Biden administration said its policy towards North Korea is to find a diplomatic approach and hold talks, like that's ever worked. In March, it is revealed that the administration had repeatedly tried to reach out to the North Korean regime, but was ignored. And that goes back to your point, Pangier fan, that the reality is that the North Koreans are smelling blood in the water. And Tristan, talk about this, because when you see you from your region, where you've had to deal with IRA terrorism, when terrorists see blood in the water, when they see the structures that are meant to hold them back caving in, they don't retreat into the shadows. They get more bold.
Yeah, I mean, whenever the only actual force that could actually take down that terrorist organization suddenly, just leaves and lets that terrorist organization run wild, it allows them, since that there's nothing pushing against them anymore, it allows them to find a firm ground, which was the only thing we had against the Taliban in all realities, was that they'd never had a firm foundation to actually have a base at, or have a way to have a route to have funding and all that. But now that the Americans have pulled out and they've captured the capital of Afghanistan, they've got all of the old Afghan armories and all that, it allows them to control the local businesses. It allows them to control the natural resources, trade routes through that region, which is a big thing, which is why Russia is now opening up talks to the Taliban and is preparing for Taliban rule in Afghanistan. Because no doubt the Russians and the Chinese will have no problem with talking with the Taliban government if it means that they get to quickly make a quick buck out of it. I'm deeply worried about what this means for India, mainly because that is the biggest nation at threat by the Taliban, which I don't see much going on in the news about, is how India is reacting to all this. It sort of seems like everyone's just sort of forgotten that was one of the biggest allies against the Taliban at the time.
If I may interject, I think that India is pretty capable when it comes to military. So I don't think they're at a risk of invasion or anything. Probably an increase in attacks. You can expect that, especially since Pakistan is India's arch enemy, and Pakistan has been friendly with the Taliban in the past. But I think from a territorial standpoint, India is not at great threat. And
I don't think they're territorially a great threat, but I think Tristan's right in the sense that the problem for India now is that because Afghanistan has been given over to the Taliban and essentially just become a haven or basically a Mos Eisley for all the terrorists around the world, is that if they start pushing into Pakistan because the thing is that Pakistan's population is very young and male, and they're very indoctrinated into Islamism, even if the government tries to stay a little bit more secular. So if these Al Qaeda terrorists and other Taliban fighters are able to push into Pakistan and even overthrow the government or start digging into the government, making the government more Islamist as they go culturally, then India could be in a threat. I think India would win any war against Pakistan, but we don't want Pakistan thinking they can never win a war.
well, another problem is Pakistan has nuclear weapons, and
that's the thing is you'd be giving nuclear weapons over to Al Qaeda. I give 1,000 Black Hawk helicopters over to Al Qaeda before I'd ever give them a singular nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
I agree with you all that there are problems now for the region now because of the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan. I've always said this before: the Taliban are essentially mercenaries of the Pakistani government. Where does the Taliban get its money? Money from? It's from the drug trade, but they can't just sell the drugs to people in Afghanistan. What they do is they smuggle it across the border into Pakistan, and the Pakistanis look the other way and they sell it through their major ports like Karachi, and get it out and have $1 billion industry, selling and all that filth. And let me finish real quick. And not just that, but Pakistan's policy towards India has always been to bleed it by 1,000 cuts, and that's why they support the Taliban, because it's part of their campaign to destroy and bring down India. And it's very sad that we've essentially ceded the ground to these Islamists from Afghanistan, but also in Pakistan.
And it's not even because I've even brought up the whole drug trade thing to people, and they always think it sounds like fanciful and it's not real. Like, no, Iran's been doing that for like decades now. They're a big ally of Venezuela because they're such big into the drug trade, to the point where the Muslim Brotherhood actually has a lot of infrastructure in Venezuela to operate into North America from. It's sort of ridiculous. People don't really realize. People don't even realize that it's happening. It's a completely undercovered story. I think if people knew about that, their ideas about foreign policy would change a lot. And people are wondering, like, oh, how did America not? And I wouldn't even say lose, more so give up on the war on drugs. It's like it's almost like Islamist terrorists are motivated to keep it up.
Yeah, because and Tristan, you've got problems with the new IRA people and others and stuff like that who peddle drugs to kids as a way, or to people as a way of trying to secure funds to get guns and arms.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is that the Afghan drug trade, which now without a doubt is going to be able to run like a wildfire throughout Eurasia, it's going to deeply damage Indian, Pakistani and Chinese and Russian culture. Especially Russia, they have a seriously big problem with stopping the drug trade around the Kazakhstan region, stuff that runs all the way up from Afghanistan that was peddled by the Taliban. And you're going to see a lot of that in the coming weeks or the coming months. So the Taliban, of course, doing the drug trade through India and Russia. And it's going to have, like, this whole Joe Biden withdrawal out of Afghanistan. I don't think a lot of people understand how many hundreds of thousands, like millions of families' lives are going to be ruined by this because of the people in Afghanistan who are now underneath a tyrannical rule. And then the drug trade that is going to ruin hundreds of thousands of families' sons and daughters' lives by getting them hooked onto drugs. And of course, this is all going to profit the Chinese and the Pakistan government through money going off to suppliers, and the Kazakhstan government, of course, is obviously profiting from it by allowing it to go through their country. This whole entire withdrawal is going to have a massive effect on social life in Eurasia. Yeah.
Even though
absolutely, and I completely agree, because I mean, what we've seen in Afghanistan is essentially kind of like what would have happened, like, and I think, like, if the IRA had won, like, because the IRA could never drive the British forces, and it wasn't just British, Scots, Welsh, people from all sorts of different backgrounds fighting in the British British Army, trying to secure peace. And this situation that we have in Afghanistan is kind of I look back to the history of Ireland, and I think, or what would have happened if the British had caved into the IRA in the early 70s, when there were actually people who said that in response to the bombing campaign, that the British forces should just cut our losses and leave. If we had done that if they had done that at that time, you would have seen something akin to what we're seeing right now. Literally, IRA thugs going in the streets, finding any person who worked ever with the British in any way, and any people who were like unionists of any kind, of any stripe, and would have just gone on a murder and killing spree. And
I think also it just shows that you can't, if an illegitimate terrorist force takes over a government, you're not going to then get a legitimate government out of it. But people non-interventionists always pretend like, oh, well, if they won, that means they're the legitimate government of the land. It's like, no. They're going to keep governing illegitimately. If the IRA took over Northern Ireland and they had been sort of like the people who were, even if it joined Ireland, they would be the people who would essentially run the government there, because they would be the power base. And you wouldn't have gotten a good, like, solid Catholic government out of it. You would have just had terrorists still.
Yeah, and it's the same thing like with the British pulled out of the South, and that's why I really support you, Tristan, and the work you do, because you're trying to do that Rethink 32 campaign, and everyone support him for that. But because this is what happened, when the British left, right after World War I, in which they said, look, we just fought this war. We don't want to fight in Ireland against these IRA terrorists. Let's just cut our losses and go in the South. And what that did is it so many people who are unionists became victims of IRA and terrorism. I've talked about different massacres and stuff like that. That happened in the region, like the Kingsmill massacre. Let's go back to you, Panjshir fan, real quick, because you are probably one of the best, I think, humanitarian interventionist supporters out there. Our Afghan interpreters who have been left behind, what is going to happen to them? We have literally, we know what's going to happen, and we've literally just said we don't care.
Yeah, I actually am in contact with the brother of an Afghan interpreter who is trapped in Kabul. He cannot get him now. He can't get out because there's no one left at the airport. He was in hiding throughout the past 2 weeks after Kabul fell, and he and two of his younger sisters, are hiding from the Taliban because the Taliban has marked him for death. His third sister is missing, and they think the Taliban might have gotten to her already. And it's heartbreaking. I don't know how to help them, and I've given them what advice I can, if there's media, try and stay around them. The Taliban are less likely to kill you if you're around, if you're being filmed by international media. But we've abandoned a lot of people in Afghanistan to certain death, and I think that's going to be the legacy of Joe Biden, because let's just set aside all the other stuff. There was no reason to pull our troops out. There was nothing pressing. It wasn't like we needed them for something else. It wasn't like the situation was deteriorating to the point where we had to withdraw. Had we just stayed, we could have, this would never have happened. And I don't see anything good coming from this withdrawal. It never seems to go well.
I know there's nothing good out of it either. I mean, it's just awful. Let's actually look at one of these articles that I have here, with regards to the status of interpreters, and that breaks my heart, and I'm really sorry for your associates and friends in Afghanistan. I'll be, we need to be, for anyone who's a Christian out there, please be praying for them, and if we can support them in any way, Panjir fan, please let us know, because if there's something that we can do, we need to do it. But let's get to this article right here and discuss this. So, Afghan interpreter who helped extract Biden, other senators in 2008, asked president to save him. So these are Afghans who are assisting us for years, if not over a decade. So in 2008, the interpreter named only as Muhammad helped in extracting Biden, then a senator from Delaware, along with then Senator John Kerry from Massachusetts, and Chuck Hagel from Nebraska, when the Black Hawk helicopters they were in were forced to make emergency landings due to extreme blizzard conditions 20 miles away from Bagram Air Force. Muhammad was part of the team that was sent off from Bagram that drove for several hours into the mountains to reach the visiting U.S. lawmakers. Hello, Mr. President. Please save me and my family. Don't forget me here. When reached for comment by The Hill, the White House said it was unable to comment on individual cases.
Bullshit excuse.
It's absolutely a nonsensical excuse. It is essentially saying that that person's life really doesn't matter. It's essentially saying, thank you so much, but you figure it out in yourself. Panjir fan, you just talked about how you have associates who are still trapped in Afghanistan. It's god awful. What does this say to those people? You talked about the idea of non-interventionism on its head being essentially racist, because it says that other people's lives in that foreign country are not worth anything.
Yeah, and I stand by that. And I find it funny that the same progressives who decry white privilege are always the first to step away from helping the least privileged, especially if they are not American. It's really, I think foreign policy serves as a good metric to show whether or not somebody is actually as progressive as they claim.
I think this is also just like, if you look at Kyle Kalinski's coverage still and all the sort of the members of the squad and all those progressives, that they have not budged an inch. They do not consider even the extraction or the pullout bad in any way. They're that ideological that they can never admit to making a mistake or backing a bad policy. They're completely in the bag for all this stuff. They'll never give it up. And what someone else's coverage I cannot stand these days is Tucker Carlson, because although he keeps ragging on Joe Biden for the terrible pullout, which everyone knows it's terrible, he still won't admit that keeping troops there would have prevented any of this. He's still fully on for we should have pulled out. We should have just not pulled out this way. And to a certain extent, Biden's lying halfway, but he is right to say that this would have happened in any situation that we pulled troops out. I'm like, well, yeah, because you shouldn't. It's like saying that, we shouldn't take the fire alarms out of our house, or we shouldn't, turn off something else that is a safety measure. Of course, if you take out airbags from your car, it's going to be worse if you get in a crash.
If you disconnect someone from life support, there's no good way to do it. They're still going to die. Yeah, that's why you don't remove a life support.
Yeah, maybe don't attack them while they're off life support, but this is going to still end in the same terrible situation. But I want to go back to a comments very quickly that Quick Stick said at one point, where they said that, it was the third comment they ever made, and are we supposed to just permanently babysit countries forever? And the thing is, what I don't understand about that is okay, we've had conflicts that have gone on far longer than Afghanistan. It's a lie that it's the longest war ever, because the war only went from about 2003 to 2014 or 2002. They weren't really even in 2001. It was not a very long war, and most of it was just an observing role, just as we aren't in a war in Germany just because we still have troops there. It's a ridiculous argument. But like to maybe make a bad analogy, it's like, well, you can't just say that forest fire is someone else's problem. You have to eventually go and fight forest fires. Just because it's not near the capital does not mean that forest fire in California doesn't matter. Like, you might want to send out like federal resources to help them out. Maybe some forest fires are too small and too far away to be able to properly like attend to, but you do still treat forest fires no matter how long it takes to fight them or how many years that you have to fight them year after year. It's a ridiculous argument that because a problem persists, that it should stop being a problem.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit of a weird statement that they would say, are we just meant to babysit them for all that time or to forever? And I would have to say is America has trillions of dollars to spend. Spending a few billion a year, only a few billion like a year at most, like if that's at the extreme case where they have to genuinely go full on in to help secure the freedom for millions of people, is that not, if it's not that big of a burden on the Americans or on any country, I mean, would you not want your money to go to helping secure the freedom for millions of people? What, or would you just rather we just drop them and just let millions of people go into borderline a slave state? I
would assume that we're all also fiscal conservatives around here as well. Is that I'm not in favor of being fiscally efficient. In that our military spending should be used properly, and we're not just dumping resources into programs that don't work overseas. Do you know that there was actually a program in Iraq? I believe it might have also been in Afghanistan, or it might have actually been in an African country that had terrorism problems, that I think George Bush put it in place. And what it was is to teach all the sort of more tribal societies and people part of the military a sort of form of civic nationalism, that you might be all part of different tribes, but this is like Somalia. We should all still care about Somalia. And Obama cut that program, and it was actually working. And that's why, if we're to blame why I find it gross that everyone's blaming the Afghan army for the collapse, despite the fact that their logistics were ripped out from underneath them by Joe Biden by canceling all the American contractors, that we never actually ended up trying to make a nation in Afghanistan. We maybe built the infrastructure, but the Obama administration, because it would have been racist or something, didn't want to teach civic nationalism in Afghanistan. It's ridiculous that they would never, and that was a very efficient program that could have helped out, but we just kept throwing money at them for training that wasn't working because they never built up the infrastructure, the civic infrastructure that made people want to fight.
Well, I'm definitely more fiscally conservative, but obviously humanitarian interventionists, that's a broad spectrum. Some humanitarian interventionists are more, economically liberal, and that they, do support, aspects of the welfare state. Some of us don't. I think about, I want to go back to your comment though about, Tristan, what you said, would you want your money spent on a righteous cause to help liberate millions of people, or just have it go to waste? I think with a lot of these progressives who are still standing by Biden is that they don't care if a bunch of Afghans get killed, so long as they can get their their welfare checks. It's awful. But let's move on to another terrible consequence from leaving Afghanistan, and it's going to break your heart, but also shock you. So the first part is that it's going to shock you. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is from this is from right here, the Daily Mail, and what happened is that there has been a recent folk singer who was dragged out of his home by the Taliban, shot in the head, and now and also former female cops are literally, trying to hide and run for their lives because we've essentially handed the country over. So, a folk singer has been shot in the head, and a top female Afghan cop is on the run after suffering a brutal beating from the Taliban in latest evidence that the Islamist harsh rule has returned. Fawad Andarabi was dragged from his home and killed by the militant group in Andarab Valley in the northern Baghlan province on Kabul on Friday. This is the gentleman right here, okay, who was killed by the Taliban. And what was his crime, ladies and gentlemen? That instrument right there, playing traditional music, traditional Afghan music, just like anyone would, who comes from a country and would play traditional songs. That gentleman was literally just killed just for that.
Oh, I'm not even sure if people realize that in Islamist societies, like dancing's illegal, like certain singing is illegal. Other than like just scripture from the Quran, you cannot sing anything.
Because they take an extreme hardline version of the religion, like because I have several Muslim friends, and also my wife is Ismaili. These people hate the Taliban, hate anyone who's a moderate, and as you can see right here, like Afghanistan's former Minister of Interior Masood Andarabi, who is also from the district for which the family is named, spoke publicly about his death. Taliban's brutality continues in Andarab. Today, they brutally killed folkloric singer Fawad Andarabi, who simply was bringing joy to this valley and to its people. As he sang here, our beautiful valley, land of our forefathers, will not submit to Taliban's brutality. This is just awful. But I want to keep moving with this article, and I'll try to be quick. This lady right here was one of Afghanistan's top police officers right here. As you can see right here, she's there in an award ceremony. She was an investigator, and look at right there. She looks like a New York cop. That looks like anything that you'd see in a Western society right there. There's no burqa. There's no. It's like completely modern. Look at this. Look at the clothing she's wearing. This could never have happened under the Taliban.
It's a fallacy that somehow the Afghanis were used to Taliban rule. The Taliban were only around from 1996 to 2001 as actually being the central government of Afghanistan. A lot of Afghanis, especially young Afghanis, do not even remember Taliban rule at all, and they're used to this more Western tolerant society. And we're supposed to pretend as if that they have anything in common with the Taliban. They literally do. They were trying to escape because they have nothing in common with the Taliban, and they see them as enemies, not just, well, that's just a different flavor of the government we had before. Like, no, they were polar opposites.
Exactly. I mean, right here is she was seen as a high-profile role model for Afghan women with well-known face in the media. She announced her death after being beaten as she tried to escape Kabul airport, where she spent 5 nights at the gate. 5 nights trying to get out. She said, I sent messages to the embassies of many countries to save myself and to my family, but no avail. And she talks about how she got to the U.S. soldiers, and she thought that she was safe. And there's her right there in a graduating class. Look at this, men, women sitting together, looking completely as equals. And what happened is that she was told to leave the area because of a bomb attack, and she even tried to get the Russians to help her, but guess what? The Russians told her no because she doesn't have a Russian passport or residency. So what's happening here, ladies and gentlemen, is that people like her have essentially been abandoned to death, and I also want to mention in that article right there how it talked about how, the Taliban, because I think you guys saw at the beginning how the Taliban are now reported to be actually having sex with dead bodies of women. Like, they're literally going and finding women, and they don't care if they're alive or dead. They're actually having sex with the corpses even. I mean, isn't this awful? I mean, this is depravity beyond anything that any of us have ever known. This is not normalcy. This is just absolute insanity. It's medieval. And I want you guys to comment on this, because this is just so vile and so debased and so and I'll even say even devilish.
Well, I think too is that people miss the point of being in Afghanistan isn't even just American interest there, isn't even just to protect people, but it's just it damages the moral profile of your own country that you can't stand up to these literal corpse rapists. It's insane that we can't actually just be, because it degrades the moral integrity of the United States to not be in this war. Just, I don't care that it's like, oh, America doesn't have strong enough interest there. Like, I believe they actually do, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, there's certain policies. It's like why I'm against like hard drug legalization. It doesn't even matter if it will reduce the amount of people using drugs or not. I believe that like keeping them illegal keeps hard drugs from being used as much. But at the same time, we should just be against it because hard drugs are bad. We shouldn't be okaying terrible things, because you'll get more of that behavior over time because you've made it a non-moral issue. And this should be an actual moral issue for the United States. And if it's not, well, where like it just degrades the sort of like quality of life even for people in the United States, like, or just the value of life.
Yeah, exactly. Panjshir fan, you talked about how you have associates in Afghanistan who are still trapped. I mean, that article right there where you saw just the despair and the extremes that people were going to try to get out. That lady waiting 5 days at the airport trying to get out, and then the recent bomb attack preventing her from escaping, and then being told even by the Russians government who who are taking advantage of this situation and don't care about the human rights or about the people there, who are actually talking with the Taliban, who was told, well, sorry, you're on your own.
Yeah, my associate in Afghanistan tried to get to the airport. I even helped, him find the mail for the U.S. Embassy to see if he could get like a temporary visa. Didn't work. Once the bomb went off, the bombing attack, that kind of killed any chance from getting to the airport. And the most frustrating thing was he was only a quarter mile away from the airport when the bomb attack happened. He was that close to making it to a safe zone. And now he's trapped. There's nobody left in Afghanistan who would evacuate him. And so I basically told him, like, if you can, see if you can make it to the Panjshir region where the resistance is. It won't get you out of the country, but it'll keep you safe for the time being. It's a relatively impassable. It's a relatively impassable region. It's always been. It's been, even during the days of the Northern Alliance, it was pretty safe from Taliban. So I basically said, if you can, try to get north to Panjshir and see if you can, because that's the last bastion of.
Honestly, I'm pretty undereducated on the Panjshir region and the Northern Alliance. But is that pretty much how much of that it would make up the territory of Afghanistan? Is that an actual significantly sized area?
It's not. It's not like a huge area. It's I don't know the exact size of Afghanistan, but it's like it's located.
It's like a province.
It's a province, and it's very rugged. It's very it's not an ideal place where you would set up a society. It's a very desolate region, but it's also very impassable. It's very it's hard to send an army there.
Okay. Hey guys. Oh wait. In the comments, I guess Quick Stick says I'm a bad person because I don't want to pay for housing for homeless people and excuse student debt. As if any that has ever actually helped. You realize that the places that try and make the most housing for homeless people tend to have the most homeless people unhoused.
Not only that, it's just a complete non sequitur. We work this out in the budget. America is not strapped for cash. We are a wealthy country. We are the wealthiest country in the world. We have plenty of money to throw around. And I guarantee you the money we spent in Afghanistan is not detracting from anything else. The only reason we haven't funded those is because we don't have the political will to do so.
People have the impression that we spend literally trillions of dollars a year on foreign interventions and just supporting countries like Afghanistan. That has stopped being a foreign intervention in 2014. But it's not even it's barely it's not even it's a decimal point in the budget. and pretending
Yeah.
like this is what could solve all of America's problems if you got out. Even Tucker Carlson does that crap where he pretends like, oh, but we could think of all the programs we could pay for with the Afghanistan money. Like, yeah, maybe for a singular state you could pay for one bloated government program that wasn't going to work anyways. So, and again, like Tucker is basically a left winger on a bunch of this stuff where he argues for basically social democrat policies as arguments against war because he thinks that it'll appeal to people in thinking like, oh, look, all these Afghanis are taking your money. I'm like, oh, I can't believe they don't want to get raped and murdered and that they're taking away like park benches from your city.
Yeah, and not only that, Tucker, Tucker doesn't even want us to bring refugees from Afghanistan. Like the other day, he was like fear mongering about Afghan refugees. He said that would like collapse the economy if we took all of them in. So it's not enough for Tucker that we abandon them to be slaughtered. He doesn't want them to even get like an iota of a chance at survival.
Yeah, Tristan, let's talk about the issue of refugees real quick, because obviously every nation has to have a refugee policy that's appropriate for its nation and for its borders and stuff like that. But when people are fleeing people like the Taliban or genocide, you need to let those people in. They're like, and just like in the history of Ireland, in which Unionists in the South were abandoned to the IRA, and faced all sorts of terrible, crimes and depravities that forced many to flee into the north of Ireland. I mean, what are we saying, to people historically who are trying to flee literally despotic regimes or terrorist organizations who literally want to kill them or rape them or enslave them, when we say, oh, well, sorry, turn around and go back where you came from?
Yeah, the refugee situation that a lot of people don't seem to really understand how it's going to work, especially people like Tucker Carlson, who obviously will point to Europe and say, look at the refugee crisis over there, which is a completely different sort of thing going on, is how the refugee crisis with Afghanistan would work would be, we have to, obviously, as many Afghans have been trying to do, which is sort of sort out the documents and everything, but a lot of the, document stations where we would be accepting refugees or immigrants at have just sort of abandoned their posts, and obviously people are being just abandoned. So I guess the people who don't want the refugees in the country are happy about that, but I mean, they're fleeing
because at the
hell.
point, because when the point is that when you're literally it's okay to have a strong immigration policy, that says, well, we have to think about workers in our country, the economics, as well as demographics or economic or cultural differences. But when people are fleeing genocide or fleeing terrorist organizations like the Taliban, you need to let them in, and you need to let as many as you can in, because if you don't, what you're doing is leaving a situation just like what you had in Ireland in the South when the IRA took over, which is where the terrorists, now in charge and now with guns, are going out and hunting anyone they can find who is opposed to them politically, ideologically, or or who, and so you have to get them out, because otherwise you're sentencing them to death. I mean, am I wrong in that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, what's going to go on now in Afghanistan is that they're going to go from house to house. Anyone who has been at all listed in any rent documents, who seem to have a lot of money, their houses will be pillaged for whatever they have. Their family members will be killed. Anyone who is listed on police documents as a woman will be obviously fired and put on a lower social standing. And anybody who is on the internet, as the guy who did the cultural music, obviously the Taliban had found out just from online or from documents which they have full access to any government document now. So that means any transaction that anybody had done with the banks in Afghanistan, anyone who had done any transaction with anything, the Afghans know what will make them money by attacking which families, which is what they're fully interested in. They're not interested in setting up a government and running it. They don't particularly care. They're basically pirates of sorts. They just want to pillage and to kill and to create utter chaos. And so refugees or people are trying to sign up, which is very disappointing to see from especially my government, where the British have sort of seemed to have just abandoned their posts, and now it's impossible basically for anyone to actually legally get out of the country, which leaves them to either run for the Pakistan border, which I don't see at all going well, or running for, towards Kazakhstan, but that's obviously not an option at all. Like, I don't see. I mean, we should support the refugees, like try to get as many people out, but I don't see how we can if our governments are just going to abandon their posts like they have. I don't see. Yeah, that's my thoughts on it, I guess.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, Tristan, because again, it's historically, happened, in, where you're from, in that region where, Unionists had to flee and get out of Dodge essentially because they got abandoned by the British government. And essentially the IRA went to town and started just killing any Unionist supporter who said, no, I don't want to leave Great Britain, or anyone who may have worked in any form with the British government and stuff like that. And, and even when, even in Northern Ireland, where or Ulster, where people thought they were safe, even then the IRA still had a long reach. And, Panjir fan, before we get to our next topic, which is on Al-Qaeda coming back to Afghanistan, please talk to me about, because you're very adamant, very much strong on the refugee issue, because you've talked about this before with the Rwandan genocide. Had the United States, had Great Britain, had France, had all these nations, intervened and stopped that genocide in its initial stages, it would not have become the humanitarian crisis that it became. Because people say, oh, well, you just want, people coming, the people coming to our nation, if you want to solve the problems that cause people to flee, then you have to solve them and not just turn a blind eye to it. And by having this indifference, it's not only, in my opinion, a closet form of racism, because you're essentially saying, well, that person's life is not worth my time and effort. It's also absolutely callous, because you're essentially saying, so what if they die? I don't care. And that's not Christian whatsoever.
Yeah, well, not only that, if you don't want refugees, maybe work to solve the problems in those countries so they won't be fleeing. I mean, even if we're going to go at it from that angle, it's still an argument in favor of intervention. And not only that, and the consequences of not intervening in Rwanda not only resulted in the massacre of over 1 million people, it also resulted in the conflict spilling over into Zaire, into Mozambique, into Central African Republic. A lot of the wars that are still ongoing in Central Africa are a result of the Rwandan genocide, because the Rwandan civil war didn't as much end as it was just pushed over the border into the Congo. And, with a lot of that came after the RPF, the rebel group in Rwanda, ended the genocide. A lot of Hutus, who were the ethnic majority in Rwanda, fled across the border and established militias over there, from which they would attack the new Rwandan government, and that caused the First and Second Congo Wars, which are the deadliest conflict in the world since World War II. That killed over 6 million people, and there's still wars ongoing in that region as a result. So not only did we just allow a genocide to happen, but we basically allowed the entire region to become destabilized by not intervening in 1994.
And that's what we've now replicated that in Afghanistan, because by leaving Afghanistan and withdrawing from Afghanistan, we are opening now the floodgates to the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and even ISIL elements in the country who are going to do exactly what you talked about with the Rwandan civil war. They're going to commit massacres. They're going to kill people left and right. They're going to persecute Christians. They're going to they're even going to kill Christians, I believe. And it's important for Christians to really think about the Christian diaspora in Afghanistan and pray for them and support them in any way possible. But they're also going to go after Muslims too. They're also going to go after Muslims who they consider heretics, like Ismailis, who are very peaceful, very who have a different brand of Islam, and
the
they're going to go
Hazaras.
after them. Oh, what was that?
And the Hazara minority. Afghanistan has a lot more ethnic groups than than other countries, but the chief rivals there have been the Pashtuns, who are the ethnic majority, and the Hazaras, who are an ethnic minority. And the Hazaras generally follow Shia Islam, whereas the Pashtuns, which the Taliban is mostly Pashtun, they follow Sunni Islam. And so you have both an ethnic conflict and a religious conflict there. And the Taliban has targeted the Hazaras for genocide before, and now they have free reign to do it again.
Exactly. So let's go to another article real quick, because I want to get through the topics that we have. I want to do a maximum of 2 hours of a stream. I usually, just because I usually do 1 hour and 15 for this stuff, but I want to go longer because this topic is just so important, because literally this is a no going back moment. This is something that is literally changing U.S. international history, Central Asian history forever, and the implications are awful. So our next article here from the Drive War Zone, Al-Qaeda kingpin resurfaces in Afghanistan surrounded by Taliban security. Who would have thought? Amin al-Haq's reappearance under the Taliban's protection highlights concerns about the U.S. government's remote counterterrorism strategy going forward. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is a former affiliate of Osama bin Laden. This is him being welcomed into the country by Al-Qaeda supporters and pro-Taliban supporters. So, video has emerged online today. It reportedly shows Dr. Amin al-Haq, who served for a time as the personal security chief for Al-Qaeda founder Osama bin Laden, the whole reason for going in Afghanistan, traveling in the open in Afghanistan for the first time in a decade with a Taliban escort. And remember, the Taliban said they wouldn't work with Al-Qaeda. If the description of this video is accurate, it can only raise questions about the current relationship between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and whether the former group will gain a safe haven in the country. So here's the video right here, all right, of this person reemerging in Afghanistan. So there's the car right there, everyone. This is him being welcomed across the border from Pakistan, which is obviously very complicit with Al-Qaeda. And this is the gentleman right here in the car. And here he has armed detail, all Taliban, protecting him and making sure that nothing happens to him. And here's him even being welcomed. Oh, look at this idiot taking a selfie. My God. Seriously. This is what's going to happen. So, and as you can see, he's got this procession right here of Taliban protectors, and it's just got awful. But this was reportedly taken at the Nagara province, which is where al-Haq was born. He is believed to have fled al-Qaeda's cave complex and tore a border into Pakistan with senior members of the terrorist group, including bin Laden himself, sometime between 2001 and 2002. Al-Haq was arrested in the Pakistani city of Lahore, but was released in 2011 under murky circumstances. Wink, wink, we know Pakistan was involved. And subsequently disappeared from the public eye. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have been saying this for a very long time. Pakistan supported and aided and abetted Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, and there's your proof of it right there. You have another prominent member of Al-Qaeda who was literally just across the border, had been arrested, quote unquote, and then released, quote unquote. I wonder why. And literally now is free now to begin all over again, to start afresh, and without and in the open, you know, in the open, and continue and reignite Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. So it's not like he's going to retirement. No, they're going. The old gang that is left, and there are some who still survive, like Batman, who are coming back and are going to make things terrible. I mean, Wyatt. I mean, the U.S. presence in Afghanistan, NATO presence in Afghanistan, British presence in Afghanistan, at the very least, prevented those people from engaging in their terrorist activities. And now,
and it made Pakistan have to be a little bit quieter with its support for terrorism, because the thing is that when you have the American military right next door, it's a little bit hard for you to be supporting publicly these Al Qaeda like figureheads. But as soon as the Americans are out, not only is Pakistan denying America bases in their country, and other sort of, I think even Uzbekistan and other places are also not allowing the Americans to have bases there, but now they can publicly come out and probably not only more publicly support these crazies, but they can probably fund them more publicly now as well. Because who's going to punish them?
Bingo. I mean, because now there's no, the U.S. has no boots on the ground. It has no assets on the ground. So, I mean, the potential for even a drone strike is pretty much now even out of the question, because you have no assets whatsoever to do that. And Pakistan has been no help whatsoever. It's a reminder, historically, I think, if you look at for example, the IRA, how they got tacit support from the government in Dublin, members of the military, members of the police, and members of the government, who were essentially, kind of saying, oh, we don't support IRA terrorism, but then looking the other way, and even some people supporting them behind the scenes. I mean, it's just terrible. And this is what we have here in Pakistan. We have a situation that is where the Pakistani government aided and abetted the Taliban, rescued the Taliban, because if it were not for the Pakistani government, Al Qaeda in 2001 during the intervention after September 11th, 2001, would have been annihilated. But this is what happens, when you let these crazies get support from a government like in Islamabad, which essentially supported, aided, and abetted them. And I like what you said, Wyatt, that at least our presence there was a deterrent. But expand on that, because now there is no deterrent. So what happens?
Oh, well, not only like we were talking about before, the narcotics trade is going to shoot up, but it's going to be a place where, not only because we've left so much military equipment there, but because it's a very safe area of the world to be in. Afghanistan is really a place where, unless you're directly there, you have no ability to even strike into it effectively, even if you had bases in Pakistan, Uzbekistan, or anywhere around them, Tajikistan. You have to be on the ground, or you're going to turn it into, again, a Mos Eisley for terrorists, where everyone can show up for training, for planning, and then they can then use it as a base to go into other countries and actually execute those attacks. We didn't just leave Afghanistan. Afghanistan doesn't exist in a vacuum. You've essentially made a place for Qatar and Iran to put more funds into to train terrorists, and while also pretending like they're at arm's length. And we know people like Joe Biden will go along with them and pretend like all these terrorist attacks are completely disconnected from other Islamist enemies in the region. And on top of that, if they actually can professionalize the Taliban and Al Qaeda, I can guarantee they will try and invade one of their neighboring border, like one of the bordering countries that might even be trying to play ball with them right now. It's all temporary. If all these sort of other Central Asian countries try and partner with the Taliban government, they'll eventually break down and invade one another, simply because they are coming from different Islamist perspectives or from communist dictatorships. It's not quite communist. I'd say in Tajikistan is basically just an authoritarian, anti-Islamist country, which would, again, I guarantee they're going to go at it at some point.
Well, I'd like to expand on that, because you talk about how the situation creates a vacuum and a potential for other bad actors in the region, like Pakistan, like Iran, and like Qatar, to gain more influence and gain more power, and to spread their, terrible ideologies of, uh, of Islamism across the globe. Because
Well, I don't think people realize that Qatar is literally the biggest funder of terrorism in the world, even over Iran and even over like Pakistan. They're by far the biggest. And the thing is, what Qatar needs to be able to actually field forces like sort of groups that Iran puts together in Iraq is that they actually need territory to plant them because, of course, it's a tiny country with really no military of their own. And basically, these places like Afghanistan can be sort of in a certain disconnected way. They're owned by Qatar because Qatar can mobilize forces on the ground there. So we didn't just give Afghanistan back over to the people of Afghanistan. The people owned it actually before the Americans left, and now they don't own it. And now it's essentially a foreign territory held by different Islamist regimes. It's not just going to be a Taliban government that serves the interests of the Taliban only in Afghanistan. It will be something that will be a proxy state of a lot of other countries that are up to no good.
100% agree. And, Pangier fan, you talked about earlier, how you're having regrets having voted for Biden because, there were because there were people who voted for Biden and because, they saw, like a lot of they saw the problems, with the Trump administration and they said, well, I want to go back to some sense of, quote unquote normalcy. And I didn't vote for Trump in 2020, but I didn't vote for Biden either. I voted actually third party as a protest vote because I was frustrated with both. And I thought that Trump was going to win. So I thought my vote, like my protest vote was going to be meaningless. And I said, okay, well, I think he's going to win. So it's meaningless. But then obviously he didn't win. And then Biden won. And now Biden has literally just absolutely turned to be out a disaster. I mean, I know you and I have some disagreements on this, and that's okay. I personally now am wishing that am thinking that well maybe Trump might have been better, but I know that with you personally at least that you feel betrayed by Biden this Afghanistan control.
I don't regret my vote for Biden considering the alternative. I think that Trump was so damaging to American democracy and to America's standing in the world that I really don't see an alternative that would have been preferable. I didn't even like any of the third parties. They were all populist hacks. So I don't necessarily regret my vote. It's not like I would have voted differently.
You don't regret your decision, but you do say you're kind of you kind of feel still betrayed though that
I do because now, and I voted for Biden. I didn't expect him to be, the liberal hawk that somebody like Hillary would have been, but I thought he would be at least a little more careful than what he's done now. And what really got me upset was his doubling down his mistakes. Like I expected him to make a mistake, but I thought he would at least have I thought at least he would learn from his mistakes when they became so obvious. But it appears I hoped for too much because Biden is still painting this whole thing as a success when it's the complete opposite of success. This has been an unmitigated catastrophe that was entirely avoidable. And I'm frustrated that he's still not accepting responsibility.
Yeah, and that just shows you the failure of a president when you literally fail to acknowledge your serious mistakes. Because the Afghanistan debacle was avoidable, and President Biden and Kamala Harris, they are absolutely shameful and shameless. They have no shame. They keep deflecting and say, "Oh, it's the prior administration's fault. Oh, I was stuck to this deadline. Oh, I had to do it. Oh, well, we couldn't stay longer, oh, this."
Yeah, that's another thing. They blame the Trump administration's look, normally I would be the first to give Biden the benefit of the doubt, but he's been president for almost 8 months now. He has had and he has undone countless other decisions made by the Trump administration. He has no excuse when it comes to this. He could have altered the withdrawal plan. He could have canceled it entirely. There were so many ways that he could have changed this, and he didn't. So blaming Trump can only go so far. I certainly blame Trump for starting this whole thing in the first place, but I can't blame him for what's happening now because Biden had every opportunity to reverse it.
I can't exactly blame Trump for any of the pullout though, because at the end of the day, the Democrats wanted to pull out regardless. It's the Democratic Party that wanted to leave, and even Trump had proven that he didn't want to leave, or he wasn't going to leave, in the sense that he had so many years to leave and he never did it. And even Mike Pompeo, I think he's partially right here that their deal with the Taliban had actual rules. I wouldn't have met with them and made a deal at all because they're never going to listen to rules. So what's the point? But their deal did have rules, so they were never actually planning on leaving in March anyways, because the Taliban had not met any of the actual requirements for the American military to pull out.
And I think of it this way, it's because, when we think about, what if Trump were still president, that kind of delves into the alternate history realm. We really don't know. I do think about this, though, that if Trump were president and the Taliban had reneged on a deal that they made with him, there would have been a response, because the thing about former President Trump is that he was not a man to be stabbed in the back. If you took a deal and stabbed him in the back with it, he was going to make you pay. And I think that with he would have made sure that U.S. forces bombed the hell out of the Taliban when they tried their initial incursions, because this is the biggest mistake of the Biden administration, is that when the Taliban were first making their initial incursions, the Biden administration held the Air Force back. It did not do airstrikes. This was critical because when the Afghan Air Force was in no position to have a successful air campaign of bombings and stuff like that and targeted strikes against the Taliban. It was not in that position. It didn't have the pilots. It didn't have the equipment. It didn't have the supplies. And so it essentially left the Taliban free to roam with, where now once they had to hide and, be secret, now could go out and open with almost no fear. And so that's the biggest disaster of that, and this is why former President Obama is actually preferable to President Biden, because in 2013-14, when ISIL was rampaging across Iraq, at least President Obama had the sense to tell the Air Force, bomb the hell out of ISIL, because we have to stop them. Because the thing about it is this: people don't realize how close ISIL came to winning in Iraq. The Iraqi army literally was running and fleeing. It was overwhelmed. It couldn't stand up to them. You had lots of Islamist groups join ISIL. You had former Ba'athis. Ba'athis is the former party of Saddam Hussein. Former guys joined the group, and they were running. They were running everywhere. They were just taking territory, committing massacres, killing people everywhere. And some of the worst depravities they committed were in the city of Mosul, which is historically a Christian city. Many Assyrian Christians live there. It is, part of the, Assyrian aspirations, for a Christian homeland, and they just committed terrible depravities. And had the United States not used the Air Force to stop their gains, we could have seen the ISIL flag in Baghdad, literally over the capital and taking over the country. And then people would be saying, "Oh, well, why were we there in the first place? All this terrible stuff." No, we were there to stop that. And the problem is that the Joe Biden administration chose not to do what former President Obama did, which was to bomb the hell out of ISIL, and they chose not to do what former President Trump did, which was bomb the hell out of ISIL, and also killed the leader of ISIL, al-Baghdadi. So they chose to lose this. They chose to sacrifice Afghanistan to the Taliban. And I want to move on real quick to another topic, which is a terrible crime that committed. And I want to my viewers know that this is viewer discretion is advised. You're not going to see a pretty video. This is something that needs to be seen, though, because you need to understand just how bad it's going to get in Afghanistan, and just that we've abandoned the people of Afghanistan too. So I'm going to roll this.
Hands in the air. Surrender, Commando, surrender, yells a Taliban member. But the rules of war don't exist on this battlefield. Seconds later, more than a dozen members of the elite special forces have been executed. Sources confirmed the bodies of 22 commandos were retrieved. A villager pleads with the Taliban to stop shooting, asking, "How are you Pashtun and you're killing Afghans?" CNN has spoken to 5 eyewitnesses to this massacre, which occurred last month in Jalalabad, a district of Faryab province in northern Afghanistan. All confirm these events took place. The commandos called for air and ground support, but none came, says this local resident. Then they surrendered, but the Taliban just shot them. Among the dead, 32-year-old commando Sohrab Azimi, the son of a retired Afghan general. This born leader did his military training in the United States and was due to marry his American fiancée next month. His father said Sohrab tried to call in air support during the attack, but it never came. Anyone would be angry if that happened to their son, he tells me. Why didn't they support the operation? And why did someone tell the Taliban they were coming?
So it's just horrific watching that, because it was all avoidable. This was all avoidable, and we just let it happen. You know, I mean, Tristan, you know, I mean, talk about that, because, you know, it reminds me in a way almost of, you know, history in Ireland, you know, IRA massacres of Unionists and Protestants, and even assassinating and killing Catholics who were not on board with their republicanism. I mean, just this depravity, you know, just talk about that.
Well, the video that we've seen is quite shocking, to say the least. It says quite a lot about the situation. Something that I found quite eerily similar was how he said about how he had called in for some air. Obviously, the air never came. It sort of reminds me of the fall of Saigon, where you had, I forget the general's name or how to pronounce it. I know the general's name, don't know how to pronounce it, but he had held back the Viet Cong for 3 days, and
that was Zwan Locke, I believe.
Yeah,
like the battle. Like they literally had like smashed like 3 North Vietnamese divisions, and the Americans pulled out air. They were even the air support was still there, because the thing is that it was difficult for it's not like the Americans put their jets on a aircraft carrier and sent them back at that time. Like they were still in the area. They could have gotten there. They were in, at very least they would have been in Taiwan, and they refused to hold back the Vietnamese columns of tanks. And the only thing that the South Vietnamese lacked was that their air force was small, because of course they relied on the American air force, because it was promised to them. And of course you're not going to waste money on an air force if the Americans, who are far superior, are going to do it. That's the thing, is whenever I hear, it's disgusting whenever people say, oh, the Afghan army just surrendered to the Taliban immediately. Like, no. It's impossible to fight people like this if you don't have some sort of like air force, and they just didn't have it.
Yeah. I mean, I find it very eerie. This whole entire pull out of Afghanistan. It's the complete same that happened in Vietnam, which a lot of us in Northern Ireland support South Vietnam. We'll sometimes see a South Vietnam flag on a flagpole, but I mean, it's a very dark reminder of all these times that various, you know, anti-war presidents who, you know, in their political campaign, because it'll get them votes, whether they believe it or not, they'll just say, oh yeah, we'll pull out of this war and there'll be no more death. Of course, people are going to go like, oh, no more death, let's vote for it. And then when it actually happens, you see these horrific sights in countries like Afghanistan, Vietnam, and wars that we could have intervened in, but obviously the president said it wouldn't have been worth our time in Africa where there's like horrific wars, like as was said earlier, Rwanda, where we could have intervened, but we didn't. We just stood by and watched it happen. Uh, and now we're having to do the exact same that we had to do with the South Vietnamese in a sort of sorry way where we're like, now that we've pulled out and we've basically absolutely doomed millions of people to this horrific regime, oh yeah, we'll accept refugees, and then that's our story. Meanwhile, your home is now sat there in ruins in Afghanistan. It's not good enough from the government to just. I have to honestly wonder if there's a way that we could just re-intervene, but I know that's never going to happen. Where it's like,
Yeah, because it reminds me kind of the Irish Civil War. British pulled out troops, because they said, oh well, now there's not going to be any more killing. There's going to be peace. And then what happened after the authorities left? Irish Civil War. People killed left and right everywhere. Terrible killings, on both assassinations, chaos, destroyed numerous cities. So the fact of the matter is that this is the result. When you leave, this is what you get. Just like we saw, what happened historically in Ireland, it was historically in Vietnam. When the authorities who are fighting for a righteous cause leave and abandon the locals to their fate, you see terrorism, you see chaos, you see murder, you see civil war. And that video that we saw that's just the tip of the iceberg, everyone. That's just the tip of the iceberg. That's this terrible tragedy of it. I want to show something real quick. But Panjshir fan, your friends and your associates over in Afghanistan, when you see horrific videos like that, you talked about one of the people who said they had a female family member who has gone missing. I mean, when you see stuff like that, that's not helpful.
No, it's horrifying, and I last heard from him, this morning. So he's probably safe for now. But the Taliban, I've heard, are going door to door, looking for collaborators, and I'm very afraid for his safety and his family. Especially now that no one is left to get him out.
Yeah, and that's the horrible thing, is that who's going to save these people? I mean, Quickstick says, why should we intervene? Who are we to impose our morality on other nations? What right does anyone?
We're not the Taliban. That's who we are. We're not an oppressive theocracy that executes people for being gay, or for not believing in God, or for believing in a different God, or not praying. We are not equivalent. We are not the same as the Taliban. And I find it insulting that these people would say, oh, you're no different than the Taliban because you want to impose your morality on others. The Taliban don't operate on morality. They operate on immorality. Our system, our values, the values of the United States are objectively orders of magnitude better than the Taliban.
I totally agree with you right there, because it's that classic isolationist argument. Oh well, who are we to impose our moral system? When the Taliban's moral system is literally that, go door to door, find women who are single, hand them over to your fighters, and forcibly marry them off, where they are essentially raped because by their new essentially not by their husband, by their rapist, because these are not marriages that they want. These are marriages that they're forced into. When you have the Taliban literally even having sex with corpses of women who are recently deceased, when you have the Taliban who are literally as you saw in that video, massacring um, Afghan soldiers, who are unarmed and have surrendered and are under the protection of the Geneva Code, which is supposed to be that you're supposed to accept surrendered prisoners and treat them with dignity and humanity, and just slaughtered them like they were dogs. And when you have a system where, Christians are persecuted, treated less than second-class citizens, where there's forcible conversions, when you have that with the Taliban, that's you. I'm sorry, but I don't care. You need to intervene, and you need to deal with that, and you have to stop it. I don't. So nobody has the right to do this sort of thing, just because. So imagine you have a neighborhood, right? And down the street from you, there's a guy who beats his children. Well, do you say, well, that's not my concern because, that's that neighborhood, not mine? No. You call the police. You try to get those kids out, or you do you stop it yourself, because you're not going to allow these people to do this horrible depravity. And we have to stand up against that because we're better than that. And I want to bring up something real quick right here. So people say, well, it's done and over with, and people who say, oh, well, it just had to be done. It was inevitable. I want to talk about this real quick. Let's go back in time a little bit to World War II. And I want to talk, and let's show something that should remind people today, the people who say, oh, well, you have to negotiate with these Taliban terrorists, or you have to make accommodation with them. I would like people to think about that question as we watch this.
Bomb attacks on American forces. Suspected collaborators murdered. The struggle to root out former party members. These stories may seem ripped from today's headlines, but they're not. This is Germany in the months and years following World War II. For decades, little was known about this post-war period, the Nazi resistance movement, and the guerrilla fighters who tried to resurrect the Third Reich. Until now. On the night of August 9th, 1946, 15 months after Germany surrendered to Allied forces, a powerful bomb blast rocks a local church run by a noted anti-Nazi priest. A month later, the U.S. constabulary post is stoned. Then a grenade attack targets a U.S. soldier. Across the city, swastikas and posters spring up declaring that the Nuremberg trial verdicts are not justice, but homicide. Throughout Germany, groups of Nazi loyalists plot to overthrow the occupation forces. In Stuttgart, one underground band of resistors is led by 23-year-old former SS soldier Siegfried Kabus.
Kabus and the young guys around him, they were kind of desperados. They didn't find their place in the new society. And so they tried to find their place by attacking the Allied forces.
A series of raids and house-to-house searches results in the arrest of 70 individuals, but not the bombers. German and American investigators desperately want to find the mysterious attackers. Who are they? What do they want? And most of all, how can they be stopped before more people rally behind their cause?
So I want everyone to realize that the insurgency that we've seeing in Afghanistan, or that we saw, is not something new. This happened in World War II even. There was actually a Nazi insurgency after the occupation forces occupied West Germany. They were hardcore Nazis who wanted to drive the United States and Great Britain and France out of West Germany, or force them to leave. And they actually were involved in, as you can see right there, terrorist attacks, bombings, attempted killings of U.S. troops and stuff like that. and even the assassination of a German mayor who had been selected by U.S. forces at one point. So
yeah, I think that was an attack in 45 by the actual organized forces of the werewolves, like their sort of secret, like almost suicidal terrorist organization at the end of the war. Oh, I just wanted to sort of insert this one thing. If people are interested in this topic, there's actually a really good film called The Night of the Generals that's sort of about the Nazis after the war trying to overthrow the government still.
Yeah, and people don't realize that. So people think that, we can't stop, resistance movements like that, or that, oh, well, that you should treat with those people. Let me ask that question. Let me ask you this question. Would any of you feel good about treating with, essentially, with Nazis? Would any of you would treat with those people and treat them as equal? Would anyone today support the United States government in 1946 talking with the werewolves and saying, "Well, how can we accommodate you? What can we do to make your political grievances understood?" Panjir fan, talk about that. I mean, imagine if what the U.S. forces had done what we have done with the Taliban today, where we talk with them, saw the representatives in Doha, even visited their offices there, and rather than lodge a diplomatic complaint about them even setting up an office there, I mean, talk about that. Can you imagine that?
Was that directed to me?
Yes, it was. Because imagine if we had literally done the same thing to if we've done in Afghanistan in World War II with the Nazi werewolves.
Oh, we should have. We should never negotiated. We should never negotiate with Nazis. I mean, I think it's that's what Chamberlain tried to do. That didn't work. So no, I think the same as with the Taliban. You should not negotiate with terrorists. That's kind of like our mantras. We do not negotiate with terrorists, because if you negotiate with terrorists, then you give them an air of credibility, and they don't deserve that legitimacy.
Exactly, because there were those people that even back then, who simply said that if we can outlast the U.S. forces, then we can get them to leave and resurrect our German Reich. Imagine if we had actually done that. I mean, Tristan, let's go to you. I mean, and then we'll go to Wyatt. Tristan, I mean, the people of the United Kingdom suffered extraordinarily fighting Nazi Germany in World War II. Great Britain at one point stood alone. It was isolated. It had to fight Nazi Germany and even also imperialist Japan at one point by itself. It was on the ropes. It looked as if the last bastion of freedom in Europe was going to die. But Great Britain, stood alone and fought and made the fight until the Americans joined. And can you imagine that after the war had been won, right? After the British and all the sacrifices that had been made, which were terrible, but had been made and were necessary, and it's terrible that they were so high. Imagine if the British government in 1946, after the war, had decided to open negotiations with the werewolves and say, "Oh, well, let's talk with them. They have grievances that they need to discuss." And we should recognize them because we don't want to see another British soldier die. Can you imagine just how a slap in the face that would have been to every person from the United Kingdom, and even Irishmen who went and volunteered with the British forces to fight Nazi Germany?
Yeah, no, it's kind of, if that was to happen, I don't honestly. The British negotiating with Nazis after World War II, if that were to happen, that would have been genuinely probably the biggest insult in history. Because the simple fact of the matter is groups like the Taliban and the Nazis are morally wrong in every standing. There is nothing to negotiate about. The monsters have been deposed, and whenever a monster is deposed, it is for you to judge them and to sentence them. You wouldn't see the officer hear out the prisoner whilst he's on the way to death row. So how would you morally justify yourself for your murder or your killing of this person? You wouldn't hear that because you know they are morally wrong and they're the ones who have done the crime. I mean, what should have been? Yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry. Yeah, and I agree with you because treating with the Taliban and treating with like the is essentially is a slap in the face to all the British, American, and French and other persons, especially Afghans, who have lost over 60,000 people. Way more than America has. In this fight, it's a slap in their face, and it would have been the same. And it's the same thing right here. With these Nazi insurgents after World War II, negotiating them with them would have been an absolute slap in the face of every single British, American, French, Indian, and every member of the Commonwealth. It would have been a slap in every single one of their faces for the sacrifices that they had made. And I want to go on to the next point because we only have about 15-20 minutes left. But I just here's what we need to do now. Now we have to ask ourselves, what are we going to do now? Because we've argued about the morality of it. All of us agree this is morally wrong. All of us agree this is an absolutely disastrous decision. All of us agree that historically it has always been proven disastrous. And all of us agree that we cannot allow the Taliban to win. So what do we do now? Well, Panjshir fan, you have a big thing where you say your name essentially is Panjshir Resistance Fan.
Yeah.
Let's talk. You want to talk about that a little bit?
There's a resistance faction in Panjshir that's still anti-Taliban. I think we should provide them with material assistance. We're kind of in a bind. We can't give them direct military assistance because of that stupid deal that we're still adhering to. But I think we should give them political support. I think we should, under no circumstances, ever recognize the Taliban government. I've heard the Biden administration muse about recognizing the Taliban as the legitimate governors of Afghanistan. We should under no circumstances do that whatsoever. We should continue to recognize the Islamic Republic. And I think we should provide them with material assistance, intelligence, weapons, and hopefully foster a grassroots anti-Taliban insurgency. And that can maybe someday liberate the country. That's a long shot, but I think it's a lot better than just turning tail and leaving for good.
I agree. I completely agree with you. I mean, Wyatt, you being me and you being, strong, interventionists. I mean, it's crucially important that we support the Panjshir resistance and what's left of the Afghan government that is not Karzai, because Karzai is a coward who abandoned his people when they needed him most. But the people who are now in Panjshir Valley, I mean, at the end of the day, it's up to us conservatives and neoconservatives to advocate on their behalf, since the Biden administration won't.
Well, I think a good takeaway here, even just from a perspective of someone who's on Twitter, someone who has a blog, someone who has a news publication, someone who has a YouTube channel, the best thing you can do as well is to promote actual, like, the morals behind interventionism. The one gift that we've sort of been given from the collapse in Afghanistan is I feel like a lot of people around the world have seen the consequences of non-interventionism and how it's deeply immoral. And that you should be calling, and you should be also going after these Islamist organizations and better explaining why they're dangerous. Like the one thing, and it sort of connects back to the Nazis, with the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a big extremist influencing organization or ideology all around the world that sort of comes out of like Egypt, and is very well entrenched in Turkey, Iran, and in a lot of these terrorist organizations, is that you should be explaining that these people are essentially Middle Eastern Nazis. This is Middle Eastern Nazism. These people absolutely want the Jews wiped off the face of the earth. They have no tolerance for anyone who doesn't like conform with their authoritarian Islamist beliefs. They hate women. You can't they have no tolerance for any sort of LGBTQ people in their countries, regardless of like what your social conservative views might be. Of course, you still stand up for people that you might disagree with, even though they might like. Regardless, I'm not going to go into too much into that, but you get my point. Where we have to be better explain why these groups are dangerous, not just saying, "Oh, it's the Taliban," because people don't know what the Taliban means. You have to actually explain to people what these groups are and what their ideologies are similar to in a Western context.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out what this person has said in the comments, which was when the Taliban government starts directly invading neighbors, you might have a point. Until there's no justification for interfering in another country's internal affairs. But I don't see how that's the case. If America was to have, which there are plenty of armed militia groups in America which do intend to someday overthrow the government, whether they will ever succeed or not is, But if any of those groups were to ever rise, like groups like Atomwaff and all that, you would expect for the British to intervene in that and to help America get out those. But by this person's point of thinking is, oh, if like any sort of like very far right or a very far left extremist group was to rise up in any other country, it's not your right to intervene into that country and to stop a morally wrong terrorist organization from taking power. I don't see how that person could think that's an insane way of thinking. Sorry.
I think that's a good example. It's a good example too, because I think you should be putting into that context for people that if your country is being overrun by far right, far left, Antifa types, like wouldn't you want, like if Vancouver, let's just say, is like this sort of silly example, if Antifa somehow took over Portland, I don't think any of the citizens would be complaining if the Vancouver police came over the border and the Canadian military came over to assist the Americans in dislodging Antifa.
I agree with that. I'll let you go make your statement, Tristan. But just what Quick Stick said real quick in the chat. He says that's America's problem, not our intervention, which just makes things worse. So if Anton Waffen, which is essentially a neo-Nazi group, or if Antifa, which is essentially a Stalinist group, took over the country or took over a state, just let that happen? Heck no. Tristan, sorry, go with what you were going to say.
This person is a British person from what I've seen earlier in the comments, and I'd just like to say if ever the IRA or UDA or even the British neo-Nazi factions, which are a thing in Britain sadly, or any of the far Stalinist terrorist groups like the ones in Wales where it's the neo-Nazi groups, I would expect if they were to rise up, I would expect for my neighbors like Germany or America to help us take those down. I don't see, I imagine this person is an English person. If I'm wrong, sorry for judging someone by the cover of their book, but I imagine that their whole attitude would change a lot if suddenly, the British nationalists rose up and started killing people. You would then I imagine that they'd be pro-intervention. But obviously that is sort of the issue with the First World and all these Western nations. Scottish. Yes, there are plenty of right and far left-wing terrorist groups in Scotland as well. That is the problem with the First World, is we've gotten too comfortable where we can just sort of watch all these massacres across the world and just think to ourselves, if we don't do anything, we still live a comfortable life over here. So it's not my problem. Why should I
The funny thing is, the people in the West who talk the most about like us, like you have privilege, blah blah blah, are they least likely to actually care about people who have absolutely nothing in foreign countries. They'll call people privileged in the U.S., but those people are also somehow bad people for wanting to reach out across the globe for people who are actually facing certain death if they aren't given immediate assistance, because that's somehow discriminatory or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is we basically have become a benevolent. I mean, the first world is borderline benevolent, and they could do whatever we could literally do anything we want. Our governments can do whatever they want, and there would be no real way that terrorist organizations around the world or any like fascist regime in Africa could stop us, or any of those sort of like communist groups around Africa could stop us, and we could actually help liberate countries. But because of like we have the chance to do something about it, it won't be any burden on our nation to intervene on this subject. As we could see with Afghanistan, it was only costing America a few billion at most, but America has trillions of pounds to spend, so it's nothing on them. There is it's below 1% of their income. So I mean, I don't see why we shouldn't.
I hope you sign up for my pro takeover Equatorial Guinea organization. It's not an actual organization. I'm just kidding. But I like to think about it. Like, you could literally take over an absolutely brutal African dictatorship like Equatorial Guinea in an afternoon. And they have tons of oil resources. You don't even have to take them. The whole point is open them up for actual trade, open them up for trade finally, and stop letting them basically enslave their, basically everyone who's not part of the government in Equatorial Guinea is a slave who works in a natural gas fields and does like other sort of agricultural work just to keep the state up. Like, people live in slums despite the fact that it could be one of the richest countries in Africa if it wanted to per capita. But yeah, why not? It would cost you probably $100 million to liberate Equatorial Guinea, but it's like, oh, it's their problem. Like, why is it their problem? Like, how is it? Like, I understand that they're the ones facing it, but that's like saying that you're not going to ever help anyone on the street. You're never going to, you're never we should wipe out all welfare programs because it should just be the poor's fault to be poor. I'm not even for the bloated welfare programs we have, but these people who are social democrats who push for really, really bloated welfare programs don't understand the irony of them not even doing the bare minimum for people outside of their borders, yet they are totally okay with illegal immigrants coming into the U.S. and immediately getting signed onto these bloated programs, despite the fact that they do not face nearly the same problems as someone in one of these West Coast African countries or the Middle East.
Yeah, it's awful, that these so-called progressives are literally looking at Afghans and saying, "Well, you're on your own." It's not very progressive if you, if I would say so myself. What the United States today is faced with a lot of enemies. We have Islamist terrorists and with the Taliban, Al Qaeda, Al Shabaab. We have communist dictatorships in Venezuela and in Cuba and in North Korea. We have kleptocratic governments like in Moscow, which are no friend to us and hurt our interests at every opportunity. We have a lot of threats, and we even have groups even in our own country, on the far right spectrum, like Anton-Waffen, and on the far left spectrum, like Antifa. We've got a lot of these problems with, and should we start talking with like Antifa, let them set up a political office? We should start talking with Anton-Waffen, let them set up a political office in an American city and have a political wing. Are we serious? No. It's the same thing with the Taliban. We should not support them. We should support the resistance at every turn. And Panjir, fan, I want to show you and everyone this, some of the people who are taking up the cause, against the Taliban in Afghanistan still. And I want everyone to follow them too. So we have right here Amrullah Salah, who is the acting president of the Republic of Afghanistan. And I'm going to post the link to his Twitter, and I hope you all can make a follow. This gentleman decided not to flee Afghanistan. he refused to leave. Unlike Karzai, who fled, he said, "I'm staying," and he went to Panjshir, and he's carrying on the resistance. And I want to show, what some of his Twitter feed right here, the big, but I also want to show an interview that he had a long while back, which is where he said that even if the Americans go, we're not going to stop fighting.
I just made sure to like and retweet that. The guy seems based.
Oh, he is based. He is totally based. So here we go. We're going to listen to it right here.
Feel like you're in danger of being abandoned by the U.S. yet again?
Let me tell you this. If U.S. decides to leave tomorrow, we have no influence on that. All we can do is to tell them our story, remind them of our common objective, remind them of our common goal and common enemy. But if they decide to go, it will be their decision. We are a poor third world country. We know our limitations. We are very modest. We say our enemy is not defeated. Your stated goals and objectives not met yet. Your promises are not fulfilled. The morality, politics, and principles of being a superpower requires you to be here. But if you decide the other way, it's your decision. I can't stop them. But if they withdraw, it doesn't mean I stop. We are very clear in that also. We will continue because we are from here. And these mountains will remain forever. And these rivers will flow forever. Yeah, it will be great to have them. But if they leave us, it won't mean we will cease to exist.
Feel like you're in danger of being
And I love that quote right there. Even if you leave, we still exist. And, these mountains, these rivers are ours. And I also want to go to another one, person who was actually a commando who was with the resistance in Panjshir. This gentleman right here is active in telling, the story of the Afghan resistance in Panjshir, how the Taliban attempted to break into Panjshir but have been defeated and have been blocked off. And in this incredible thing right here, the Taliban sent 1,000 reinforcements from Takhar, Kunduz, Kabul to recapture Baghlan. They were ambushed by resistance and trapped with the help of local resistance. 800 Taliban eliminated in the past 36 hours across all fronts. Dozens tense with dead Taliban. So the resistance is not dead. These are Taliban fighters who've been killed by the resistance recently. And these are regions in which now that the resistance is popping up. So what you see right here in green are regions that are under the full control of the Panjshir resistance. What you see right here in red are regions that the Panjshir resistance are either trying to take or trying to hold. And everything here is black. And you might just say, well, look at all this black right here. I want you to see that green right here. There are people who have said that they will not surrender to the Taliban, no surrender, and they will keep fighting. And we need to support that because no cause is sacrificed. And this is great too, this video right here where they liberated a district. The video is right here where they took down the white flag, as you see right here, and replaced it with the Afghan national flag. And this was just a week ago. And I want to show the last one right here, which is Ahmad Masood, who is the son of the very famous Panjshir fighter who essentially fought the Soviets and fought the Taliban and died in the cause. Rest in peace to him. But his son went to Panjshir too, and is still continuing the fight. Because if you've seen that, he took a helicopter to Panjshir, and he's galvanizing a resistance. And even now, the Panjshir resistance are getting trained. They are working hard to ensure that they are going to keep Panjshir safe from the Taliban. And they are going to fight. And I want to show this video right here. Hopefully there's no ad.
Looks like.
And there's an ad. So I'm just going to skip that. But as you can see right here, the soldiers are training. They are working desperately to get themselves ready for the fight that's upcoming. And it's sent the Taliban have literally sent hundreds of fighters to the region. But they are not going to take it. So they're going to keep fighting. And what we're going to see, hopefully, is a resistance that continues to fight and is successful. Because Panjshir, a resistance fan, I mean, you know more about. I think you know a little bit more about that stuff than I do. Talk to us about it.
Well, I'm by no means an expert on Afghanistan. My area of expertise is more Central Africa. But I do know Panjshir has long been it's a region that's very like naturally defended. Like there's a lot of it's very impassable. It's hard to send an entire army in there, so that's I think one reason Taliban haven't been able to overrun the resistance there, because the area is pretty well fortified. And
well, also the Taliban don't even have that many troops because they'll probably face the same problem with ISIS, is that they can hold towns and cities if they can dig enough troops in, but they don't really have battle lines. So if you can actually start to sort of use their own tactics against them by sort of bringing a lot of troops to bear in one small district where the Taliban don't have a lot of people, wiping them out, and then recapturing it, making the Taliban, if they want to, the Taliban are probably actually going to end up wasting a lot of their resources trying to capture the stuff back in these regions where even with all the American military equipment, it's going to be extremely difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact of the matter is that, you know, it's so incumbent of us not to surrender Afghanistan to the Taliban. And even though the Biden and Kamala Harris administration have, it's time for pro-interventionists, neoconservatives, and allies to get up and start advocating on behalf of the Panjshir resistance and against this evil. We've gone over the 2-hour mark. I don't want to. I hate to go over that. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm just going to show one last tweet to you guys in the audience, just so you can see the craziness. Because we talked earlier about how the progressives, you know, who call themselves, you know, anti-colonialist and all this jargon, and say, oh, you know, think about the people and the humanity. I want you to guys see this tweet right here. So Adam Kinzinger is a Republican. He's a former U.S. soldier. He actually voted to impeach Trump in 2020. And because he voted to impeach Trump, he became very popular with Democrats and gained a lot of followers of Democrats. But I just want you to see what happened once he said that Biden's decision to leave Afghanistan was terrible, because he posted this video, as you see right here, of an Afghan comic who the Taliban have admitted to killing. And as you can see with him, they literally are beating him as a, you know, thinking it's so funny. I mean,
in a horrifying video that was spread widely on social media. Khasa Zwan, a comic from Afghanistan, was shown being thrashed and abused by the Taliban. The Taliban took responsibility this week for the comic's killing, shooting him multiple times. Taliban spokesman Zahibullah.
Yeah, and it says that, you know, they'll be tried. It's not going to happen. We know that's not going to happen. But no. I want you to see what people wrote right here. You know, they're saying, they said, Congressman, you are a soldier and civilian leader. That's an inherent conflict. A soldier believes that he should accomplish a mission. Civilian leaders are supposed to keep soldiers out of pointless, hopeless battles. And I just responded, what you said is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, Paul Manning musings. Because to them, Afghans are expendable. And another person right here too. The statement is untrue. How long would you stay in Afghanistan? Forever? I mean, and
Yes.
this lady, yes, and this lady's a CEO. The lady who wrote that is a CEO. I mean, she's in charge of a company, and it's like we're still in Germany, we're still in France, we're still in Italy, we're still in Japan, we're still in South Korea, and why? To keep the peace.
It's like, oh my goodness, I can't believe we've been fighting these forest fires year after year. When can we just sort of disband the wildfire department?
Yeah, exactly. The same thing right here, It's like, we appreciate your service and understand your emotions, but should we have stayed 20, 30, 40 years? Can you be sure staying would have prevented this and other atrocities?
Yes.
Yeah,
because it was
prevented it for
literally
years.
proven for 20 years. Yes.
Yeah. That's what I put right here. Yes. And then I had right here, it's sad, it's funny and sad at the same time, But this is the reality you're faced with, ladies and gentlemen. What we have right here. And I mean, it's it's just awful these people think this way. But then there's going to be another one. It's like another one. Right here it says, what did you expect to change so that it could? There were a very long time it did not get better. That's just nonsense.
Yeah, like literally there's a reason why people are fleeing is because they know it was far better when the Americans were around, and then like there would have been no complaints from the Afghanis if it was just a generic change of government in the country. It's like how the South Vietnam government actually changed hands a lot of times throughout the war, and there wasn't really any rioting over it because people just realized that it was okay, there is just some generals fighting over who gets to be in power, which is why no one really ever rebelled against the South Vietnam government, even though they're corrupt. The whole point is that nothing was changing really, other than at very least the communists aren't around. That's why when the communists did come over the border, people were escaping. They didn't care when the South Vietnam government was changing hands between South Vietnam generals, because nothing was fundamentally changing. When people start fleeing, it was better before.
Bingo. Just like right here. I keep asking myself why they made 9 Fast and Furious movies. What the heck's that got to do with it? And it all comes back to the mighty dollar. Maybe a little thinking yourself, my man, and put the daily...
I read that tweet. I showed that tweet to the suicide hotline. They told me I need to kill myself.
Like, seriously, these people are crazy. And it's like, I responded, you need to stop, chugging the RT, Kool-Aid. It's rotting your brain.
Yeah. Also, I wish the military-industrial complex is a real thing. I mean, unfortunately, it isn't. If anything, this nation America is far too isolationist. There are some places I think we should be intervening in that we aren't.
Yeah.
Well, even then, I don't even understand the stupid arguments like, oh, we went into Iraq for oil. Like, do you know what's been the easiest way of getting the oil? Just signing a trade deal and going along with whatever Hussein wanted. Like, what are you talking about? It literally cost more money to go into Iraq, and we didn't even get oil. It was just more so the Iraqis got to manage it, and American companies sort of benefited from having access. But you could have gotten access from just offering them access, or from just paying for access.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, right here, another stupid comment. You're right. Police them all forever. Is Lockheed tweeting these for you?
Yeah, because Lockheed only makes missiles. They don't make anything else. They don't make any transport aircraft or any non-military equipment. No, they only make war equipment.
Yeah, and another person too, Adam, please stop. It's the same, that's the response. Just stop talking about it, because they don't care. They don't care. They want people to stop talking about it because it can be forgotten. Well, you can't forget it. And here's another one too, right here. The Afghanistan army and president did this. What the hell is he talking about? The Afghan army literally lost over 60,000 personnel, and we're losing numbers way over ours.
And should it be in Syria, Yemen, and Myanmar, and the Congo? Yes, 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 and yes, we should. Yes, I want intervention in Myanmar, and yes, I want intervention in the Congo.
Yeah,
I've advocated for both.
I know, yeah. And the thing is, these people are just nuts. They oh, well, should we do this? And I'm like, yes. And
Stop threatening me with a good time.
Yeah, don't threaten me with a good time.
Yeah, don't threaten me. It's a good time indeed. And I'll go with another one right here where it says Americans should be proud of what the U.S. government and military accomplished in these past 2 weeks. President Biden deserves credit. Yeah, I kid you not. This is from The Atlantic. Deserves credit. Yeah. He deserves credit.
This is what undiagnosed mental illness looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is what he deserves credit for. All this military equipment, these helicopters, and even aircraft getting into the hands of the Taliban. But there are people though that are just so stupid, like this person right here. We are proud of our president and troops. Well, I'm proud of the troops. I'm not proud of the president. And we will fight the media who contradicts this. This one is a stupid. He says right here, "I fight fascism." I'm sorry. No, if that were true, then you would oppose the Taliban. It's a bunch of virtue signaling. And I'm sorry, guys. It's gone longer than I usually goes, but I'm really happy that we have this conversation because it's so important. And I want to play. I hate to keep Tristan on too long because I know the time difference. So can you stay on just maybe 5, 10 more minutes?
It's fine. I'm absolutely brilliant.
Okay, so I want to go and talk about. I want to show one thing to the viewers again. This right here of Lay Min Dao, because right now we have a situation where the Panjshir resistance is essentially going to have to essentially fight this fight by themselves, because we have chosen the path of isolationism, and we've chosen the path of essentially sacrificing the people there to the Taliban, and I'm not going to stand for it. None of us should stand for it, and we all need to just absolutely, those of us who are here in America, have to make the Biden administration, the Kamala Harris administration pay for this. When the midterms come, we need to vote every one of their friends out of office. And for those who are international, we need to put their feet to the fire every time we can and remind them of this, because this needs to be a stain on their careers forever. And I'm going to show what true bravery is like, not the fake bravery of the president who has literally abandoned ship in Afghanistan. I want to show what true bravery is like. So let's.
In anxious Saigon, the name Xuan Loc becomes synonymous with hope and heroism.
General Lay Min Dao defied the communists.
I will hold Langsan. I will knock them down here, even if they bring here 2 divisions or 3 divisions.
Brigadier General Lay Min Dao told the assembled newsmen that he'd beaten back 6 major attacks in 5 days. I don't care how many divisions the other side sends against me, he told us. I will knock them down.
I think the enemies, they think they can swallow down very easy. But now I can say with you, they hit to the rock. They hit to the rock. And we are broken their heads already.
What is the morale of your men here, General?
I can say with you, they fight 5 days, and now today they still lunge with the attack and push enemies away. And you go with the face of my son, you always smiling and with good chest, good condition.
Is this battle crucial, do you think, to the future of Saigon?
Focus. If we hold here, I think we can give a good confidence for the people of Saigon. So We will try very hard. We try to do our best to keep it. This is the first wave of attack. Enemies can use more regiment, more fresh regiment to launch some next attack again. But no problem. No problem.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, you know, that man was a hero. You know, that man stood his ground and fought against communism even after he'd been abandoned. And the people. Sorry about that. Forgot to stop that. But that man was a hero, you know. And those people, like we talked about, you know, we saw on Twitter, you know, like that you were criticizing, Panjir fan, you know, those people aren't heroes. The president's not a hero. The
No.
people who are fighting and dying there without even any support, without even any help, are the ones who are the true brave ones.
Yeah, that's why I really admire these people above all else. Like one of my like I also love studying history. One of my favorite topics is the invasion of Poland, especially the Polish army, because they fought even alone, even when they were not given any support from Britain and France when the Nazis invaded. They still fought to the bitter end. They never officially surrendered. They basically fought until they were completely wiped out. And I feel like that's I find that to be like an incredibly courageous and honorable thing to do, just to say, I'm not going to surrender to you. I'm going to fight, you know, to the death to protect my country and my sense of honor.
Exactly. You know, these gentlemen are exactly brave, you know, and, you know, Wyatt, you know, we abandoned our anti-communist allies in South Vietnam, you know, and now we're essentially abandoning our pro-democratic friends in Afghanistan. This doesn't bode well, but I mean, this does not bode well at all, and it breaks my heart.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, like, because guys, I mean, this breaks my heart. You know, when I see stuff like that, because you know, generals, like people like Lay Down, who fought the communists in Vietnam. When the war was lost, they spent decades, many of them, in communist re-education camps. Many of them suffered permanent disabilities as a result from the beatings and the torture, and you know, and what we're seeing in Afghanistan is we're seeing a similar thing. We're seeing people hunted down like dogs, and it breaks my heart. You know, that's why we have to. You know, that's why those people in Panjshir, you know, who are fighting. You know, we need to. If you're a Christian, you need to be praying for them. You know, you need to lift them up in prayer and ask God to protect them and look after them and keep them. And you know, and if you're a Christian or if you're not a Christian, you know, you need to be finding what ways we can to support them, getting the message out, tweeting about it, talking about it. You know, whatever we can do, because the fact of the matter is that there are Afghans across the globe who are protesting the Taliban, and we have to back them up. You know, we have to support them because we cannot surrender in the face of terrorism. We've seen Colombia, you know, where my mother's from, you know, welcoming FARC into the political arena, which is essentially a Marxist Leninist terrorist group, has been absolutely disastrous for my country. It's allowed for communist infiltration in Bogota and allowed for them to get political representation and to cause more death, because there's still a faction who are still fighting with the gun, and they're getting support from Venezuela. You know, we are seeing in Northern Ireland, Ulster, and in the Republic of Ireland, where you know new IRA people are popping up. They're getting bolder, and they're getting armed and getting more aggressive, and you know, trying to stop the work that our friend Tristan is doing. You know, into trying to infiltrate his organization, find out the addresses and residences of their members, and trying to intimidate them. You know, we have so many issues, today that we have to face, but we cannot lose sight of the goal. We have to keep fighting, and we have to keep supporting those who are doing the fight if we can't fight ourselves. So because it's so important right now. Because guys, viewers out there, and to you all, the sharks are out there. The sharks are swimming. I'm going to show one last thing, and then we'll do closing. Because I just want you guys to understand that this is serious. This Afghanistan withdrawal is not just about Afghanistan, it's about the world.
So I just want to begin today with something that I never...
So, ladies and gentlemen, that's what we have right there. We have this terrible situation now. The enemies of freedom abroad are now more emboldened and getting stronger. And this is why this fight is so necessary. We cannot stop. We have to keep fighting. We have to keep standing strong. So, guys, let's do our closing. So, let's start first with Wyatt Claypool. Give us your closing thoughts in about 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna keep it really short. I think there's all this whole topic today, and just like talking about other sort of interventionist type other topics sort of in that sort of line of interest, is that it sort of shows you the power of rhetoric. Is that all this didn't happen because of the Taliban, or it didn't just happen out of a vacuum because Biden happens to hold these views. It's because society holds these views, and the only way you're actually going to protect the Afghanis in Afghanistan is by sort of, to a certain extent, protecting them at home, is actually pushing rhetoric, actually making the case for intervention and why people's lives actually matter overseas, and it isn't just whether it's in your borders and not. That the reason the Afghanistan conflict was sort of lost in the same way that the Vietnam conflict was lost. It was lost in the United States, where people, because the conflict was never properly explained to them, and because the propaganda from the non-interventionist side was so powerful, that the army, it doesn't matter how well they fight, they were going to the entire conflict was going to end simply because of political priorities at home. And that, I think that you have to make the case for why the priorities, like why Afghanistan is like an American, is a Canadian, is a British issue.
Yeah, thank you so much, Wyatt. We do appreciate your thoughts, and I appreciate you coming on the stream. Again, everyone, please support Wyatt Claypool's work. He, again, does a lot of great things. He's on Twitter, he's active, but he also is the senior correspondent, again, for the National Telegraphic.
I'm also, it's the Telegraph. I'm also the editor of it, and we're currently being sued by Conservative Party people.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I should tell you more about that later. It's quite interesting. Also, Daniel Boardman, our sort of other sort of the main owner, he's also being sued by people for talking about the Muslim Brotherhood.
Oh, really? Well, let's keep spreading the word, okay? Because Muslim Brotherhood affiliates are global, and they have to be combated. So keep it up, Wyatt. Thank you so much. Now let's go to Panjir Fan. So Panjir Fan, give us your thoughts.
Well, unfortunately I can't be very optimistic when it comes to Afghanistan, and especially or this presidency for that matter. I don't see anything good, at least in the near future, for Afghanistan. All I can do is hope that the Panjshir resistance holds their ground and holds their resolve. I hear they're in talks with the Taliban. I guess the Taliban are trying to see if they can convince them to surrender. I hope they don't surrender. I hope they can maintain a level of resistance against the Taliban. I think that's really the last hope for Afghans, is the Panjshir resistance. And I think we should absolutely provide material assistance to the resistance front in Panjshir. And as for Joe Biden, it's going to take a lot for him to earn my respect and my trust back, because he shattered that when he did this immensely flawed and botched withdrawal. So yeah, that's all I have to say. I can only pray for better things to come in the future.
Well, thank you so much. I do appreciate it. And I'm also posting the link to your blog spot because you did talk about these issues of interventionism and the effects of non-interventionism and isolation.
That link is to my article in Rwanda, which is actually my favorite article of all time. If you go to that link, it talks about the Rwandan genocide. I wrote that article about 2 years ago, and that's my favorite article.
Oh, so I did find your blog spot. So here it is. So my apologies. So this is the one that you should check out. So
yeah.
I want to thank you so much for coming on. We're going to have you definitely on the show for a NEO conversation, like one-to-one in the future, because I definitely want to talk to you about Rwanda.
Oh yeah, that'd be great to do that. Thanks.
Hey, no problem, man. You have a good one.
Thanks, you too.
All right. And now, Tristan, let's go with your closing thoughts.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to Net7 for letting me on. It's been great. But I'd just like to say that the war in Afghanistan is a dark reminder of such events like the fall of Saigon and of what could have been in South Korea. If we had not intervened there, God knows what would have happened then. It's a very good reminder that we have to stand by countries like Taiwan, like Northern Ireland, like all the South American nations are against communism, against radical religious movements, against fascist movements, because at the end of the day, our countries have the power to do something, and if we don't do anything, then those millions of people will suffer. The causes of us doing nothing about it. I'd like to say for everyone to pray for the people in Afghanistan at the moment, and if there is any way that you can help them help them in any way that you can find out how to. Spread the word around about the resistance in Afghanistan. And yeah, thank you for letting me on.
No problem, Tristan. It's been great having you on. Remember, everyone, he is the leader of the Irish Unionist Party. He is advocating for Rethink 32, uniting Ireland with the United Kingdom, rule from London, and we'll support him and his campaign for that against communism and against Marxist-Leninism. And so we do appreciate your support, my friend, and thank you so much for coming on. And I've also included the Twitter. Please, everyone, give him a follow and support him on Ko-Fi. Okay? And yes, we will continue as Christians to pray for the resistance and pray for the people of Afghanistan. Everyone, thank you so much for coming on. I do appreciate it. This has been, a great episode with some great speakers. Everyone, thank you so much. Please, everyone, don't forget, death to all tyrants. God bless you all. Have a great day, and pray for the people of Afghanistan.